Today, we're stepping into the world of digital storytelling and memory preservation with a remarkable guest, Cristian Cibils Bernardes. Cristian is the founder and CEO of Autograph, a platform he calls Human Historian, designed to capture and preserve the stories that make us who we are. With a background in symbolic systems from Stanford and experience as a software engineer at Google, Cristian brings a unique blend of technology, philosophy, and human connection to his work. While he doesn't have a direct tie to Parkinson's, his mission, ensuring that voices and experiences are never lost, resonates deeply with our community. Together, we'll explore how storytelling, memory, and technology can help us live exceptional lives, even in the faces of challenges like Parkinson's. Welcome. So,
Thanks
you're the
for having me,
CEO
Chris.
of a
I'm
company
excited
called
to chat with you.
Autograph. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you got started in that?
Sure, yeah. So Autograph is an AI. We created a digital interviewer called Walter. Walter's not unlike a podcast host, and he calls you or a loved one whenever you want, usually around once a week, and he interviews you about your life, starting with your childhood, teenage years, college years, or, wherever life takes you. Walter sort of follows you along in this trip down memory lane, and we store the recordings. And we do really cool stuff with the recording. So we transcribe them, and then we create these Wikipedia-style pages for everything in your life. So for every person, every place, every story, every event, every theme. And so our idea is to let families accrue this knowledge, wisdom, and social capital so that when the next generation is going through life and maybe they're recording their own journey and saying, Walter, it's a big week for me. I may have to move to New York to go to college or to get a job or something like that. Walter can say, hey, this reminds me of something your grandpa went through. And Walter would be able to surface back the memories of grandpa to that child as they're making the decision. And, there's many different ways of doing it, including one of the things that we can do is we can actually make a model of grandpa that sounds like him and has all his memories so that you could have a conversation so that the future can talk to the past, essentially. And so it's been incredibly rewarding to see the initial usage of Walter and how important his role is in making people feel heard and seen and valued. A lot of people go through life without realizing that they're the protagonist in a story that they're writing. And so Walter is really uniquely suited to remind people of the value and worth of their own story and how it can impact those that come later. How I got started into this was I went to Stanford. I discovered this really weird major called symbolic systems that is kind of, it was, my concentration was in artificial intelligence, but what I like about symbolic systems is that it's a mixture of computer science, philosophy, psychology, and linguistics. And so it doesn't give you just the how, it also gives you the why, or tools to think about the why. I've always been very passionate about, social change and what kind of technological solutions can help society get better and self-heal, as opposed to a lot of the technological innovations that we've seen that have, led to polarization or other kinds of or anxiety, isolation, a sense of disconnect from the real world. So I, discovered that, fell in love with the discipline and the style of thinking, and it's very interdisciplinary. I spent some time as an engineer at Google where I did both ads and education. And it was very interesting to compare and contrast both perspectives. I left Google and I joined my parents' company. My parents are both tech entrepreneurs from Paraguay. So they're in Paraguay. I grew up in Paraguay. It is very rare to have, there is basically no tech scene in Paraguay. And so to have, grown up, seeing them try the classic sort of Silicon Valley style of grit, but in a very different context, has always been a huge inspiration. And so they needed some help pivoting the company. It used to do SMS infrastructure for, the telcos of the world. And now it became kind of an investment firm. So I helped them out with that transition for about 2 years. But because my parents are ultimate, the founders as founders come, I had accrued enough cognitive dissonance from them saying you need to think like a founder and act like a founder and build those founder instincts. And so I knew that I wanted to build something for my own. But this was around the time that OpenAI had just launched ChatGPT. So it was kind of a incredibly dynamic place, and it was OpenAI was killing all these startups and then trying to figure out, but what do I do with AI that is good for the world, that connects me to my family and my story? It was a difficult thing to figure out. I couldn't find the idea then. So anyway, I decided to write sci-fi novel, which was kind of a side quest in my life, where essentially what this is where I started to look for a tool that would help me write the next big chapter in my life. I had just turned 30, ChatGPT had just come out, I just got engaged. And so I was like, I'm here on planet Earth for a very short period of time. I want to make it count. I wish that I could use AI to help me live my best life. And the next best thing I came up with was like, well, at least I should start by telling my story so that when AI gets good, it may be able to help me. And then I got carried away and turned that into a sci-fi story. And so it was a really fun experience telling my piece through a fictional lens. But I didn't expect to find this existential relief of, hey, I told my story. Like, if you wanted to figure out what made me, then you would be able to find it there. And that took around 6 months. And then by the time I wake up from that fever dream, I'm like, okay, I have to promote the book now. And so I started a podcast to talk about our humanity in the age of AI, basically. What is left of us if machines are going to do all the jobs? And, we have to reinvent economics. We have to reinvent our sense of self-worth. We have to reinvent, well, what does it mean to be? And like our moral rights and legal rights and like IP. There's this massive thing that's about to happen to the world. And I wanted to start having conversations with thought leaders around what happens. And I love podcasts. I love sitting down with somebody and figuring out what made them who they are and like how did they get here and how, what tickles them intellectually. And I just love people. I remember thinking when I was doing the podcast, I wish I could interview everybody on earth. I really wish I could. And in this process, I realized that one of the stories I really should record was my grandma. My grandma had a crazy life story. Her dad was an MI6 agent. They lived in Europe. Great-grandpa shipped the family off to the ends of the earth. Great-grandma and her 2 kids ended up in Paraguay, of all places. And they made it there, in a single mom situation, single mom of 2 daughters. And my grandma became an industrialist. She taught, she wrote books. And this is in the context of the 1950s, very machismo-based, Paraguayan society during a military dictatorship. And so I wanted to record her story, and we set a time for an interview. And a few days before our time, she had a stroke. And that left her paralyzed for the last 18 months of her life. And, I found myself in the position where I had the outline of questions that I knew I wasn't going to get an answer to. And that was the catalyst moment for me. I was like, well, okay, but the universe is forcing me to look at something. And what are the threads that I can connect here? Okay, identity as storytelling. AI can now interview everybody on Earth. It's actually the most accessible it's ever been because you could do it over the phone. And not only is it good for the future generations to have an account of what happened in the perspective of those who lived it, but also it's a good thing for the people living it. Telling your story is a good thing. It gets you reps on this, this idea of who you are or this version of you that you will leave behind. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. This is a solved problem now. We have a chance to negotiate terms with our impermanence in a way that we haven't been able to before. And
oh, that's great.
Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it, and now we're here.
Because that's one of the things I talked to my dad about several years ago was starting to document about your life, whether, and then my niece went to do an interview and just write down some questions to ask because future generations are going to want to look back and say, well, what were my grandparents like, or what were my great grandparents like? And so with AI, I think it's fascinating, but every life has I believe what you do is every life has a story. I don't care who you are or where you come from. We all have a story, and we can share with others to help others. And, because that's one of the driving forces in my mission behind this podcast is to try to help as many people living with Parkinson's as possible, but just helping people in general. And I think the platform that you have can be one of those where people can utilize that to tell their Parkinson's story, and other people can learn from that. It doesn't necessarily have to be family members. It can be someone else in the community can say, wow, I didn't know that you could do this and that can help you. So that's why I really wanted to talk to you. So that's fascinating.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And we're just launching this feature that we call shared libraries. So the way it works today is you tell your story and your stuff gets aggregated into your library. So there would be Christian's library or Chris's library. and I can share any of these pages with whoever I want. So if there's a page in there that comes back that I like, that Chris would really benefit from, I could share it with you. A lot of times we want to share with groups. Like, I want to share this with the whole family, or I want to share this with one side of the family, or I want to share this with my high school friends. And so we're building groups exactly for this purpose, right? And even before we started marketing the stuff, like, it was pretty apparent that there were a lot of people that had overcome really difficult challenges that wanted to tell their stories so that other people could be inspired by them. This is a very emotional, kind of harrowing thing, because you have people expressing extremely, extremely difficult things, but they came out on the other side and they identify as the hero that slayed the dragon. And they want to sort of let the record show that I won this battle. And if anybody needs encouragement, they can look here. So yeah, this is very much aligned with what we want to do. And like, you can kind of think of all these support groups that can emerge pretty easily, where everybody can start sharing their experiences with this particular kind of struggle and how they went about it.
I'm sorry. That's what I was going to ask you, because there's a lot of support groups out there. There's a Parkinson support group, there's cancer support groups, and sharing success stories or what worked or how you overcame a challenge and I think it's very powerful. So I'm glad to hear that you talk a little bit about that. So, and sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
yeah, and these is like a big beast, right? Like it. You can easily imagine if you take, like, I don't know, 100,000 people that are going through something like this, you're going to get a lot of different responses. Like, I tried this and it worked. I tried this and it didn't work. And so Walter doesn't just help collect the information, but he also helps organize it in a way that, someone who wants to compare their experience to this will actually be able to, Walter will be able to find the resonance in the same way that he says, you have to move to New York. This reminds me of something that your grandpa went through. He can say, oh, you're going through this problem. This reminds me of something that Chris went through in this group that he shared with this group. And so it's also for the person like coming into the group to have more accessibility.
Well, the other thing I like too is
which could be extremely
it gives you the opportunity to tell a story. Everybody loves listening to stories. You sit around and, you get enthralled in the story, whether it's sitting around a campfire and someone's telling a story, but when somebody you can relate to is giving, telling their story, and you can see some of the challenges that they overcame. It's not, you don't feel so isolated, because I know a lot of times in life, I don't care what the condition is, whether it's Parkinson's or cancer or whether it's depression. I mean, everybody has something, and if they can relate to somebody else through stories or, even just short bits, it's really going to help them in their life. And it may be another family member, but that's the thing I'm really excited about with what you're doing, is that it gives the people the opportunity to share a story, but it also allows you to connect with somebody else, because a lot of times people feel isolated and alone. And I think what you're doing is really some great work.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. It's very motivating to us to have found like this unmet emotional need, right? Like we all deal with how hard it is to be human, and it's kind of table stakes that it's just you just have to do it, right? Writing my story changed my life. It allowed me to take agency and ownership over where the next chapters are going. It forced me in a position to be not just see myself as the main character, but also as the author, and also as the editor, and also as the publisher. And there is insane amount of power in feeling comfortable in those roles, where you can reinterpret stuff about your past in a way that serves you as opposed to a way that holds you back. And I agree with like that same idea, right? Like, everybody has a story. The story it's almost like a hidden puzzle piece for a problem in the future that we will need to solve as humanity. And everybody has a little puzzle piece that fits into this bigger puzzle that is like, how do we make sense of the universe? And it just so happens that when you share your story, you reveal a lot about how you see the world. Because we reflected back at you, you can now engage with it in a way that feels a little bit more external. So it's like, that is how I sounded, but it's not how I feel. Like, actually, I'm like, and so there's a reflection process that happens through this that is extremely, I think, very beneficial, like it's, Walter's in the journey of discovering you, and we take you on the journey of rediscovering yourself and reacquainting
because I think
with yourself.
Based on what you're saying, we all look back on our lives and we might have a different interpretation, but we've all gone through some great times. We've all gone through times where we failed. And a lot of times we use both of those learning experiences to, move on in the future. And I see this as something maybe that you can do as well, where you take what Walter's giving you and you can look at it and say, okay, how can I use this to, if I want to change, because everybody is, with the new year coming up, everybody's making New Year's resolutions. And the problem is when you look at the data, a lot of times New Year's only about, I think it's 20% actually keep the resolution. But if you can look at what happened in the past and you want to change it, you can say, oh, I didn't like the way I did this. So how can I change it moving forward? Or maybe I was isolating myself, but now I see there's others that have the same thing. So I want to go out and help somebody else and and then it just grows and grows that way.
Yep. No, you're preaching to the choir. This is exactly what it's the reason I stay up late at night, and it's the reason I try to wake up as early as I can, is because, the other side of it too, that is also very challenging to manage, but it's similar to some of the conversations that you have all the time, is that time is limited, this isn't something that you can put off indefinitely. If you put it off indefinitely, it won't get done, and that meaning will be lost. There will be questions that we won't be able to answer. So there's this, it's one of those things that it's interesting because we know it's something that is good to do and worth doing, but it's still easy to put off until you are faced with one of those big life reminders of how precious and short life is, and memory is something that you take for granted as a kid, but as you age, then you start realizing how some of your core memories get fuzzier, and being able to always relive your wedding with the same raw emotion of the day after is something that I was too late for that, but I really wish my kids never.
My brother and I were
just
talking about this the other day, but a lot of times people say, well, I'll do that someday. And then they pass away and that someday never came. And so I've kind of stepped back and learned from that, living with Parkinson's for a long time, and that if I'm going to do something, I want to, do it. And for instance, I love to fly fish. And one of my biggest dreams was I wanted to go out to Montana and go fly fishing. And I said to my brother, would you go with me? And we did. 2 years ago, we went and we had a great time, and it was just the best experience. And looking back now, I say to myself, wow, I'm glad I did that, where I could have said, well, I'll do that someday, and just kept putting it off and putting it off. And now that became part of my story, and he still talks about it. And so it's something that goes, on.
Okay. That's funny. I was in Montana fly fishing earlier in the year. So
where do you see
funny coincidence
Autograph going in the next 5 years? How can you expand it so that people can take advantage?
Well, I hope Autograph becomes humanity's journal. I mean, I hope that we create the right brand, space, digital, and legal infrastructure so that we can bring this emotional resonance to everybody on Earth. I mean, really, it's just building that habit of, something big in your life happens, you talk to Walter, and Walter reflects at you, the safety that lived experience is now safe forever. I'm very excited about the kinds of stuff that we can do with this information, right? So from the beginning, Autograph is a future-facing company. It's not really about the past. The past is the prologue. The future is the story that you get to write. So there are many cool things that we can do in terms of different kinds of services that we can build on top. So we could go through diagnostics route and try and sort of be at the bleeding edge of detecting cognitive decline or that kind of stuff, which is a whole universe, and supporting people, as they venture later into age with sort of AI-powered services for that population. Think of setting up checkups, or there's a whole world in which we go that direction. There's other kinds of really fun stuff around simulation too. If we have a really good representation of who you are and your entire cultural context, then we can help you practice things that you may be interested in. So for example, we can help you practice a job interview, a hard conversation with a significant other, with a business partner, with an employee, with a sibling, a parent. We can simulate different life paths. What happens if I take the left side of the fork in the road or the right side of the fork in the road and let my life happen for 10 years and run that 100,000 times? In which path am I happier on average, and as defined by me. Like in my evolution, how do I evolve? Am I a self-described happier person 10 years down the line? I think that's incredibly exciting. And you could do also stuff for fun, right? Like you and I could go on an adventure to a medieval Rome and see how we do, right? Just for the giggles, right? And then there's a lot of like more just like practical stuff. If we become this trusted repository of your information, then, and we know your privacy preferences just the same way that you do, then we can help you actually manage the context of your identity as it relates to other services. I need an immigration lawyer, for instance, and you know your budget, you know your timeline, you know what your needs are, but the process of getting an immigration attorney is pretty tedious. You have to search, you have to get referrals, you have to figure out if it's the right person, like there's a whole bunch of things. If we can help you sort that out faster, and instead of having to meet with 10 immigration attorneys, if we just get you to pick the final 2, that's a lot of time saved in aggregate across all of the economy, right? But you could think about how that applies to anything, like Christmas shopping, like I want the perfect gift for my wife,
Right.
or I want the perfect, I don't even know what I want for Christmas, that kind of stuff I think is super exciting, and because we are on the phone with our users who are sharing their most pressing life situation with us, we are in a unique position to help them manage that challenge or those like pressing things really easily. That's the 5-year vision. So really hoping that we get millions of stories by then. Like what happens at the 10-year mark?
Do you ever
That's where it gets
foresee
very sci-fi.
this being linked to any type of ancestry, where you might have relatives that live in another country and they tell their story, and people from different parts, and then next thing you know, they're second or third generation. Then you've kind of got this historical story of your whole family, based on ancestry.
Yeah, 100%. This is something that I've been thinking about very recently, but we're being disciplined with prioritizing the stories that would get lost fastest, right? So this is, we're trying to get the stories of the silver generation, and within the silver generation, there's also what are the stories that are most likely to be forgotten fastest? And so mentioning stories of, the generations that came before, what were your grandparents like? That's the stuff that's at risk, So asking my what his grandparents were like, that's like very for like stuff that would be otherwise forgotten. But yeah, back to this idea of groups, right? Like you can start a family group, and you can have a group for the siblings, you can have a group for the nuclear family, you can have a group for the cousins on one side of the family, the cousins very similar to text group chats, right? And you can have a giant group that is like all of the descendants of Chris Kustanbauter the first. I don't know, I'm making something up, right? But like your great grandfather, and all of a sudden, the descendants could be all over the world speaking different languages. That's another very cool thing that we do, is that, you can speak to Walter in any language that you want, and you can access the stories in whatever language you want. So we have a lot of interest from immigrant communities where grandma may be speaking in Mandarin, but a great-grandchild speaks in English. And you want the cultural transmission of values and certainly the record of the sacrifices made to be accessible to the younger generation who grows up in an entirely different universe.
The family story right now, it sounds like it's more just audio. Is there ways that you can take pictures? I know with AI, from pictures when the person was younger, when they were in their teens, 20s, all throughout, so that it actually almost becomes like a book where you could read and look at the pictures at the same time.
Yes. So we building out file uploads. So this is it's pretty cool how we're doing it. You just dump your files and we organize them for you. So we will find, from the pictures that you upload, who's in them and what timeline they fall into. A lot of photos have metadata in them, so we know when they were taken and where they were taken. And so we can actually organize this stuff pretty easily. But think about like journal entries or recipe cards or all these other things that are it's kind of all over the place what you can do. And a person who's helping us with partnerships described this as like the ultimate scrapbook source material. And so which kind of just inspires the next step. That is like, oh wow, is there a world in which we help people scrapbook? Like given this this archive that we build for you, can you build out pages of a scrapbook that then you can print and share with whoever you want? So it's very much the same idea, right? That how do you create these albums where you have a digital version so that everybody that you want to share it can have access to it immediately, but you could also create a physical version that serves as like even like the stuff in the back,
Right.
like we like physical stuff because it's like turning it into reality. And so we're excited to begin exploring that early next year too. Like what are the derivative products that we can build with this data? To me, like the thing is like we need to make talking to Walter as enjoyable as possible, because if it's not enjoyable to talk to Walter, then you're not going to get the data, and anything that you build on top of that is kind of a pipe dream. So we're working on like really making the conversational aspect, feeling like you have Walter Isaacson interviewing you about your life because you are the center of the world.
You mentioned social change at the beginning and wanting to, make an impact on the world and helping other people. With the technology that you have and with Walter, doing stories, how do you envision yourself being able to take what you have and being able to help society for the better?
I think, fortunately, a lot of this is baked into the premise of the service already. So when talking about your story, this whole idea of you are the protagonist in your story, and you are the author, and you are the editor, and you are the publisher comes up kind of naturally. You're sort of like writing down what will be left of you. And that is very beneficial because it helps you get rid of the stuff that isn't serving you or doesn't add up to your identity. And it helps you actually amplify, I'm really good at this, or like, yeah, I've overcame that, or it really helps cement your sense of identity, which I think is very important in a world that seems to be hell-bent on destroying our sense of identity. It's always like you're never enough. You're never good enough. You're never smart enough. You're never rich enough. You're never famous enough. You're never enough. And our whole thing is like, actually, there's infinite wealth inside of you. So that's one aspect of the benefit. The other thing that comes up is that as I am the protagonist in my story, I very quickly realize everybody's the protagonist in theirs. And I'm a side character at best in a lot of those stories. If anything, most of the time I'm just an extra. And so it helps contextualize, it unpacks this very important thing that who we think we are is a story that we repeat to ourselves kind of ritualistically every morning. We remember being who we are, and we kind of just boot back to who we think we are. And being able to create that detachment, I think, allows us to re-engage with a lot of the stories that are out there in the world that are there to manipulate us, to act reactively to a certain piece of news or a certain legislation or a certain whatever happens in the world. That detachment, I think, can go a long way in understanding that there's the dynamics of trauma. If I have trauma inflicted on me, I'm forced to have a reactive disposition towards things that are similar to that event. And when I react, that creates a reactive disposition in that person. And so it kind of keeps the cycle going forever. If I can detach from that for 1 second and not react, then all of a sudden I'm really pumping the brakes on the spread of intergenerational trauma. And because AI enables this kind of unparalleled connection between people, truly deeply understanding who you are, what your experience is, where you want to go, I think we have a very good shot of like reducing 90% of intergenerational trauma by the next 2 generations, so that my grandkids
One of the things
live in an
really
entirely
struck me
different
with
world.
what you just said is how a lot of times we don't think what we do really matters, but people are affected, and we don't realize sometimes how we made a change in somebody and how that went forward. I was just thinking it's, Christmas time here, and with The Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart, when, he gets to relive it's because you didn't jump off the bridge, you were able to affect all these other people's lives. And I think that's one of the things that what you're offering can really help people with, is to take a step back and say, wow, as they're telling their story, wow, I do have these strengths to help other people. And these other people I was able to help these other people, even though I didn't think it was, something you might do something at the time that doesn't seem important, but then later on you find out that, wow, it made a significant change in somebody else's life. So I think that's when you were talking about that's one of the things that really struck me.
No, you're absolutely right. I have a poster of It's a Wonderful Life at home.
So how would people,
I look at it every
if
day.
they want to get involved and telling their story, how do they get connected with Autograph?
For sure. Autograph.ai. We're there. We have a 2-week free trial, so you can talk to Walter as much as you want for free. You can see what these library pages look like. You can share them with folks. You can invite folks on, and you can request stories from them. So if you have a friend or a loved one or a parent or a grandparent that you want to get this for, you can also steer the conversation that they have with Walter and say, like, actually, I want when Walter talks to my mom, I want to hear the story of the first house she bought and how she had to, essentially work so hard to get it. And you can actually be a very good steward of that library. Try it 2 weeks for free, and then if you like it, you can stick around and keep talking to Walter.
Is it more? Is it a membership or a subscription-based thing where they can do it for a while and then say, I want to stop, or is it a yearly thing, or?
Yeah.
Can you explain how that works a little bit?
Oh, for sure. We charge a monthly subscription. There's a yearly plan too. And what we charge for is talking to Walter. So Walter is your archivist, scribe, documentarian, chronicler, biographer. Like he, that kind of stuff. I don't know that any of those particularly works, but that kind of is the idea. He's your interviewer. But we give you forever access to the recordings and transcripts and the library pages that we create. And you can always export them whenever you want, and you can sort of pause your account, reactivate it. If life is in kind of a boring state for a couple of months, you can pause it and come back. We have a lot of cases of folks who think that they're done telling their life story, and then a month later they come back. It's like, oh my gosh, this whole thing happened again. And so we charge, it's a monthly subscription. It's $29 a month to have
so for
the world's
people
greatest
that
interviewer
you mentioned
about your life.
The older generation, so people that aren't necessarily tech savvy, and when you're talking about AI with Walter, a lot of times there's people start to panic a little bit and say, I can't do that. Can you explain a little bit about how they would interact with Walter to give them what the process looks like?
For sure. This would be, so assuming someone who is a bit more tech savvy signs up to get this for their parents or grandparents, you sign up, you create your account, and then you can add other folks to your account. And so, I signed up, I added my mom to my account. What happens with my mom is she gets a message from us saying, hi, Vivian, Cristian has gifted you a subscription to Autograph, a platform where you can record your life story through our digital interviewer, Walter. Feel free to call this number anytime or schedule a call via this text, and you're off to the races. So it's basically like a service where we hired an on-call biographer for my mom, and she has his phone number, and she can call him whenever she wants. And so this all happens over the phone. So fortunately, there's not much of for the person talking to Walter, there's really not much to learn. Like, it's really just picking up the phone and starting to chat. What we found, this was kind of counterintuitive, but people are way more open with an AI interviewer than with a human interviewer because, first of all, there's a novelty factor. Oh my gosh, I'm talking to a computer. This is cool. But also because there's no human judgment on the other side. It's this thing that is just, designed to be there for you. And when Walter gives you validation about something that you did that you may have even been sheepish about, I don't know, like a minor accomplishment, say, when Walter actually says, this is actually really great, and gives you validation around like your lived experience, it kind of packs this double whammy where, sure enough, there's no human that is empathizing with me, but it's this other thing that's kind of even more impressive than a human in the sense that it knows all of the things that have happened in human history. And it says that my life is meaningful. And that goes a really long way. But the experience of talking to Walter is almost identical to talking to a human. Like you kind of forget. Sorry, and now that I'm on a roll, you kind of forget the stuff that makes up your identity all the time. So Walter will ask you 1 or 2 questions and you'll find yourself talking for 15 minutes about the answer and this other thread in that answer and this other thread in that answer and this other thread in that answer.
And then plus you don't have to worry about body language.
The magic really happens.
With someone interviewing you, like, oh, they're judging me or they're rolling their eyes or they're... So, I mean, that's one of the benefits. And is there anything else that you would like to share with Autograph that can really help somebody and then drive them towards, recording their life story?
I mean, I think our logo or our slogan is pretty powerful. Your voice matters. Record it. We're in a unique time where you can actually speak into a microphone and the entire world can change because of it. And We all are doing these little things that are ripples in this big pond, and some of those ripples turn into like continent reshaping tsunamis. We have a really nice opportunity to give the future a chance to understand itself in a way that we never got. Like we inherited a world that was very distorted with self-importance and public perception and geopolitical initiatives around how textbooks are created and what curriculums are taught and what like grades. We have a very cool chance for a limited window. I don't know how long this chance will exist to really change our story and write the next great chapter in human history together. So that's my appeal. Is if there's something in you that feels that you're here for a reason and you don't want to be tied up in this endless loop of cynicism and nihilism and nothing matters. And if you want an antidote to that, just tell Walter your story at autograph.ai.
Great.
You'd be
Well,
surprised
one
at
of
the
things
hero
that
you
I
discover
think we
in the
learned
middle.
here today too is we're all interconnected. I don't care where you live in the world. We're all humans. We all want similar things, but we all want to be happy. We all want to live a great life and, hopefully help other people. And that's one of the big learnings I not picked up today, but that you're building on. And I think what you're doing is great. And so I really want to thank you for coming on today and sharing what Autograph's capabilities are. And I'm really impressed with your mission and your drive. So I want to thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me, and thanks for giving me a chance to talk about it. I don't get tired of this. This is my favorite
I'm just
part of the
like
job.
you. I like talking to people, and I love listening to people's stories, and I love watching people and what they do, and because we're all unique and we all have something to give, and I think that's important. So I want to thank you again.
My pleasure.
All right.
Anytime.
Well, thank you.